So as I say, it is all about the signaling. It's not really about the policy, as we're about to see. So what does this mean? It means that when Democrats hear radical proposals, they won't just dismiss them, but they're not going to go along with them when they actually have a chance to vote on them. So over the last 48 hours, there's been a call to defund the police. And it's been fun to watch the media spin on behalf of what defund the police means. Defund the police, it turns out, does not mean defund the police. It actually just means fund mental health services. Well, if you'd said that in the first place, then I kind of would have been on board, right? Keep the funding for the police, expand the funding for the police, and also make sure that you actually have services to take care of mentally ill people, which, by the way, I've been stumping for on this program for literally years. I mean, you can go back and listen. I've done full episodes on it, on the homeless problem in our major cities, for example. But that's not what they called for. And the reason they didn't call for that is because that's not a sexy slogan. Saying we need to spend more on social services for the mentally ill and for drug addicts, that's not a sexy slogan. Defund the police is the slogan because the most radical protesters, the ones who are out chanting in the streets, want the police out of their communities. They're not being ambiguous about this. When the Minneapolis mayor, who has spent the last couple of weeks begging forgiveness for his whiteness from the Black Lives Matter crowd. I mean, seriously, that's what he did. He literally went in a crowd and he talked about his own conflicts and trying to expunge his own white guilt and all of this nonsense. And he was cheered for that. Then he was asked, do you want to just get rid of the police? He said, I'm not for abolishing the police. And people started shouting at him, get the F out of here, and shame. Right? So the protesters are pretty obvious what they want. The Minneapolis City Council is even more obvious. They're not talking about just defunding the city police and then bringing in the county, which is what happened in Camden, New Jersey. A bunch of people keep saying, well, it's just like Camden, New Jersey doubled the size of its police force. They're the most over-policed major city in America right now. They doubled the size of the police force. They just went from the city to the county. It was like 250 people. Now it's 411 people who are policing that area. So don't tell me they defunded the police. They didn't. They just shifted responsibility for the police to the county. But Minneapolis went further. They said they wanted to completely reorganize how policing is done, period. That they obviously want to minimize the police footprint. So Lisa Bender, I played this clip yesterday, but it is so astonishing and it really is indicative of where the mindset is. Lisa Bender, who is the president of the Minneapolis City Council, she actually agreed yesterday that police don't make the city safer. That police do not make the city safer. Now, you literally cannot name a case in which this is true, where removal of the police has made cities safer. It does not exist. One of the most robust social science findings ever is that when you remove police from a situation, criminals run free. That's common sense. Everyone knows this. I have a perfect case in point. For a week, the police were basically told hands off. And what happened? Rioting, looting, breaking into stores, people shattering windows, damage to cop cars that were out there on the streets. Then the cities were like, oh, you know, we actually can't tolerate this any longer. The National Guard came in, the cops showed up, and what happened? In 2 nights, it was over. In 2 nights, it was over. And by the way, in areas where they're not doing this, Seattle and Portland, for example, rioting and looting continue. It does not take a genius to recognize that when you remove police from high crime communities, crime goes up, not down. Again, one of the more robust social science findings in American race studies is that the removal of police from black communities in the early 20th century led to a radical rise in crime, which exacerbated inequality. But according to Lisa Bender, the president of the Minneapolis City Council, police don't make the city safer. They don't. Wishful thinking and singing Imagine. That's what makes the city safer. Here's Lisa Bender, full-scale idiot.
Yesterday, 9 city council members stood together with our community and pledged to rethink public safety in our community and to acknowledge that the current Minneapolis Police Department is not working to keep our community safe. And really what we pledged was to start a year-long conversation with Minneapolis residents to help us reimagine what public safety looks like as we make those short-term fixes that are so clearly needed in our department.
That was the same lady who suggested yesterday that if someone calls 911 because their house is being broken into, she said this on Allison Camerata, that if someone calls 911, they should check their privilege. Right? You have to check your privilege if you're worried about crime. Okay, so here's the thing. Top Democrats have been asked about this defund the police thing. Pelosi and Democrats were asked about the Minneapolis City Council defunding the police and looking to basically destroy the police department from within. Here is a bevy of Democrats refusing to criticize the Minneapolis City Council for taking measures that obviously are going to make matters worse in high crime communities.
People are calling it defund the police. Is that something that your caucus supports? Is it something that could happen in a federal way? Or is that just...
Well, I can't imagine that happening in a federal way, but let me just tell you that part of that cry is a desire for there to be significant higher investment in communities?
I think the Congresswoman answered your question very clearly. But the fact is that we do have a great deal of legislation coming down the pike that addresses some of the concerns of our communities across the country.
Okay, so this is an explicit refusal to condemn that, right? And then Kamala Harris was asked on The View about defunding the police. And she refused to just say, well, actually, when we say defunding the police, what we don't mean is getting rid of the police. What we just mean is we're going to shift social services. Instead, just dodged the question from Meghan McCain. And then, of course, Twitter trended Meghan McCain because Meghan McCain is very bad for asking the most obvious question. What the hell do you mean by defunding the police?
Are you for defunding the police?
How are you defining defund the police?
I assume it's removing police and, as Congresswoman Ilhan Omar said, bringing in a whole new way of governing and law and order into a community.
We need to reimagine how we are achieving public safety in America. And to have cities where 1/3 of their entire budget is going to policing, but yet there is a dire need in those same cities for mental health resources, for resources going into public schools, resources going into job training and job creation. Come on.
By the way, spending money on job training and job creation is not going to stop criminality. It isn't. It is not going to. You need to stop the crime so that people can invest in communities. You got this all backwards. The precondition to economic growth is not pouring state money into a particular area. We have tried this 1,000 times and it always fails. The precondition to economic growth is a safe and secure neighborhood, and then people bringing their money in. Otherwise, you know what, you see all the taxpayers leaving, because where do you think this money comes from? Money doesn't grow on trees. Okay, so the Democrats refusing to explicitly move away from the defund the police program because they want to, again, act on the sort of the fire in the guts kind of messaging of BLM. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that The Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content.